Hey there folks, this is Scott once again, and I'm coming back to you with another movie review, and that is of the 1989 action thriller film, Dead Bane. I don't know if you can tell, but there's several other films on this here. Back in the day, I downloaded quite a bit of movies, and this was one of them. Luckily, I was able to get a hold of it because it is on DVD, but the film itself is only in full screen. And I think it is also on YouTube. I think it might be in high definition too on widescreen. So yeah. But I chose not to rent it on YouTube, so I figured I watched it on here. And the film's directed by John Frankenheimer, produced by Stephen J. Roth, Robert L. Rosen. The film was written by Robert Foster, and the film stars Don Johnson, Penelope Ann Miller, William Forsythe, Bob Balaban, a guy by the name of Frank Military who kind of plays our suspect, Bobby Burns. His actual last name is Military, so that's interesting. Then you have his younger brother, who's kind of a notable actor himself, Tate Donovan, who is probably known for Love Potion #9 and his role on the OC, I believe. You also have William Traylor, who plays this racist police chief, Chief Elton Tremel, and this was also his last film role, from what I understood. So you also have Michael Jeter, who's sadly no longer with us anymore, played this Dr. Alexander Krantz, who Johnson's character interviews or tries to get analysis of Jerry Beck, the character that Don Johnson plays. And you also have a guy by the name of Tim Reid, who plays Chief Dixon, who he kind of helps out Beck's character towards the last 10-15 minutes of the film. And in addition to the crew, you also have music was composed by Gary Chain. However, there were some additional cues provided by Michael Kamen, who was better known to compose scores for like the Lethal Weapon and the Die Hard films, at least for the first three. And they apparently wanted a low-key Die Hard score in this film, so he was kind of throwing in the additional minute. So there you go. And the cinematography was done by Gary Fisher, who from what I noticed on Frankenheimer's filmography, he uses him quite a bit. The film was distributed by Warner Brothers, and the production company was Lamar Film Entertainment. And sadly, overall, the film didn't do that great. The budget was $14.5 to $15 million. I'm going by the Wikipedia. I think you can find this information on IMDb, I think. But yeah. Anywho, the film didn't do that great. Only made like $8.1 million, so it didn't really do that great. But I think it did gain a following on video, and apparently my dad knew about this title, and that's how eventually I come to find out about it. So, and overall, I really think this film's quite underrated. I mean, there is, a good amount of action here and there, but it also has a very unique, kind of an interesting little story, and the plot involving, kind of an underground white supremacist group, not exactly the Ku Klux Klan, but, white and pure and stuff like that, and a cop who was kind of going through a lot, like Don Johnson's character is Jerry Beck. He's going through a bit of a divorce. His ex-wife won't let him see his kids. He even wants to bring them to presents, and the ex-wife won't let him do that. And he even slams the phone down out of frustration, which is a very well-acted scene by Don Johnson. And Don Johnson really does a great job on acting in this role. He really does commit himself to this role, and he's definitely He's definitely one hell of an underrated actor. I mean, I know he was popular on his Miami Vice TV show, but that's what probably most people remember Don Johnson from. But this film, I think, is definitely one of his noble films in his career. I mean, he's done several other films before this, but I haven't really seen them. I have seen kind of his other ones after this, like Paradise with Melanie Griffin, who he was actually married to, and a couple others I can't think of off the top of my head, But yeah, I always thought Don Johnson was one of those actors that didn't seem to get a break or get that one big role that really, led him to the top. I mean, he did, several other films that I liked him in, but he just somehow his career never really caught on fire. That other than Miami Vice, he never seemed to, just never got that breakout role, unfortunately. But here, I think this is where he definitely shows that he can be, a different character who is a cop from his character from Miami Vice. He's going through, like I said, a rough time. He's been tasked with this kind of assignment whenever an armed robber in the very beginning basically kills one of the LAPD sheriffs, because this place, because of this murder happened in LA, and it happens actually on Christmas Eve, so it almost has kind of like the Die Hard Lethal Weapon kind of similarities, murders taking place on the very eve of Christmas, so yeah. And also the suspect has killed this African American who runs the convenience store. And apparently, not only is Jerry Beck, going through a lot, he's also an alcoholic that tends to drink. He even drinks during the day. And eventually it comes down to a suspect named Bobby Burns, who has been recently paroled for like a 4-year armed robbery. And eventually Penelope Ann Miller's character comes in, gets to know Johnson a bit. Then you find out they eventually actually sleep together. And then you find out there's a reason why she, got to know him is because apparently, I just killed that fly. Anyways, back to the movie. Miller's character actually was kind of on the verge of becoming his ex-wife of apparently the sheriff that was killed. The character's name is Gary Kimball, and Miss Kimball, on the other hand. And that's why she would track him down. But originally, she wanted actually Beck to find the man responsible and actually, in fact, kill him. But he said that's not his job. But eventually, he will get his man eventually. And so, while this is going on, he definitely gets to find out more about Bobby Burns through apparently his mother's. He actually goes to the Burns home. Apparently, the mother, who you never see, is actually a Hell's Angel or something like that. And there's like several other over-the-weight folks. But before I get to that, I forgot to mention that Bob Balan's character comes in, who's apparently this parole officer, Webley, who has to give him some more additional information on Bobby, because apparently Beck couldn't really find that much. And he actually has to bring the information to Beck on Christmas Day, and Webley actually has a little disagreement with Beck. He actually tells him, "Fuck you." And I remember how Johnson's character's response was, "Well, have it your way, Webley. Make it 8:30." And he ends up and says, "And fuck you too." There's actually some bits of humor to this film, not just the action. Not only is it a thriller, but there's moments of levity, and the humor is, whenever it's there, it's very effective. Just the subtle levity of humor is used very well. But back on the subject, eventually he actually kind of kidnaps Webley, and that's when they go to the Burns house to try to see if Bobby has returned there. But eventually he doesn't. He actually finds like several overweight guys there, and eventually the youngest one, John, who's apparently going to college, I think Princeton, or Yale, I can't remember. It was a very prestigious college either way. But eventually one of the guys who was staying there, who was apparently a friend of Bobby's, who was actually on parole for armed robbery as well. And when he's chasing him down, he actually knocks him out because the guy tried to grab his gun, and Beck actually kicks his ass. But unfortunately, since his character was drinking earlier, and when he's checking his wallet to see who it was, he actually throws up on the guy. Not just once, but twice. And then there's this moment where the cops arrive, and he's like, "Here, where'd you get?" He's like, "Whoa, what happened? A little domestic spat on our victim?" And then when they turn around, the suspect wakes up. He's like, "Jesus, son of a bitch, you fucking threw up on me." He's like, "Oh man, you're a real asshole. Why don't you just shit on me while you're at it?" Yeah. Eventually he gets more information out of, I think his character's name was Ellis or something. And eventually, he eventually reveals, apparently, the man tells Beck that basically, Ellis tells Beck that apparently he saw Burns driving a maroon Ford wagon and is headed north of Bakersville. While that's going on, we also cut to a scene where Burns is actually, along with a few friends of his, they actually robbed the Mexican bar and killed the patrons that were visiting there. And apparently the local police chief informs Beck of the crime, and immediately Beck leaves for Arizona, and they eventually, head to the alleged hangout where Burns is hiding out. And apparently the chief, I think I can find out his name. His name was Hillard. He eventually, tells him that he doesn't really respect Beck all that much because he's, according to him, he thinks he's a big city cop, and basically in Arizona, he's the Hiller thinks that he's above himself and thinks he's the law and no one's going to fuck with me. And then whenever they're attacked, and Hiller tries to grab him for his gun, Beck gets to it first. He's like, hey, Chief, you don't need your gun. Why don't you just tell him who you are? And he's like, fuck you, Beck. He's like, fuck you too, Chief. And your goddamn french fries. Because apparently Hiller was trying to have some steak sandwiches and fries arrive for lunch or whatever. So eventually the shootout occurs between Beck and Burns, and eventually Burns is not able to grab this box that's filled with documents. And Beck discovers they're actually a white supremacy propaganda maps, and particularly certain locations of where maybe a secret covenant is taking place and whatnot. And this also attracts the attention of Arthur Kressler, who's William Forsythe's character, who basically thinks there's just pretty much white supremacy rhetoric. And eventually this leads to another location out in Oklahoma, and eventually he comes across a reverend by the name of Gebhardt, who is like the religious leader of the white supremacist organization called the Aryan Nations, who believe that basically, white and pure and all that stuff pretty much. And apparently they want to cleanse America of its racial impurities pretty much. And apparently he basically denies ever seen Burns before. However, whenever Beck and Arthur Kressler, they're actually kind of looking around, seeing what it's like. They even have like a target shooting practice there, and apparently Burns, who's actually hidden away somewhere, looking through a microscope or a sniper scope, tries to see what gets to understand who Beck is and what the difference between a cop and a fed and whatnot. And eventually Burns comes across, is able to spring onto Beck while driving his car. Somehow he snuck in there and prepares to shoot Beck, but Beck's able to swerve his vehicle into incoming police officer vehicle, and then somehow with the use of matches he actually lights a car, blowing it up, and eventually Burns escapes, and eventually Beck has to go through this evaluation because his superiors have grown frustrated of his performance due to the fact that he's not getting along with Ancient Kressler. I'll explain later in my pros and cons of the film. Part of his alcoholism and his uncouth behavior and whatnot, or his unprofessionalism, so to speak. They recommend his boss recommends that he goes under psychiatric analysis, and that's when Michael Jeter's character comes in, tries to perform a session on him, and they kind of Beck has to threaten him because he basically made Beck ask him what was so funny, and Beck was willing to drop it, but Krantz, being the uptight asshole he is, refuses to do so. So basically he tells him he looks like Woody Allen. Apparently he gets butthurt about that and tries to say that he's a dangerous man in the streets, but Beck kind of gets back at him for that, and I'll actually kind of reenact the scene later on. And eventually, because of Beck threatening to let him pass the evaluation, he actually gets a phone call, I guess a day later, to inform him that he's now fit for duty. So he actually, in Colorado, then we shift to Colorado, and he meets an African police chief, Captain Dixon, which is Tim Reid's character, who he gets to know, and he's actually entrusts several of his black men of the force to try to track Burns, and eventually, and also Kressler kind of joins in as well. And apparently they go to this paramilitary training camp, which is owned by the Aryan Nations, and apparently ambush Gebhardt and the other members. And basically they try to do a search all over the place, to get it, because they have a warrant and whatnot. They have to search all over. Unfortunately, it's not yielding any results, which Gebhardt demands that all the police officers leave and whatnot, and also causes a bit of a brawl between him and Kressler, or Beck and Kressler. But Beck's able to somehow find a concealed door, along with Dixon as well, who actually pulls this mechanism that releases, and actually they find some kind of something that leads to kind of like an underground bunker, and eventually a gunfight ensues between Beck, Dixon, and Kressler with Bobby Burns' men. and several of the Dixon's men are wounded, including Dixon himself. And eventually, him and Burns, have a bit of a gunfight. Like he uses, first they use the kind of what's those? Not machine guns, but kind of Uzis they use, I believe, for a bit, and then they both return they both use their primary weapon. Like Burns uses kind of like a Beretta or a Browning type of weapon, and Beck uses the kind of a Magnum type Colt gun. I can't remember what it was. I have to look it up on IMDb. You know what? Let's go there and see what type of weapon was it specifically. So bear with me, folks. I'm just trying to remember as much as I can here. So. Maybe it was on Wikipedia. Maybe I'll look at that. Well, anyway, as a result, both Bobby and Beck have a bit of a gun duel, but Beck ends up winning that by using a bit of light against a mirror, and he's actually able to gun down Bobby with a couple shots, one near his heart and whatnot, and fatally wounds him. And as Burns is dying, Beck demands that he tell the truth and whatnot about killing the cop and robbing the convenience store and shooting the owner and whatnot, and shooting the police cop, which actually was shot several times in the face, apparently. But Burns divulges he did not murder anybody in Los Angeles and claims that he got the wrong guy, and Kressler's upset. And then apparently on the overhead, on the kind of like not exactly an aerial shot, but kind of like on like a overhead shot, we see a gun stick out, and we see that spoilers. If you haven't seen the film, don't watch this review. You've been warned. Spoilers. Okay, if you watch it or you don't want to watch it, or you want to watch it but you don't care about spoilers, here you go. We found out that actually it was John that actually committed the murders, and we actually, like in the beginning, we actually see his eyes, but apparently the director kind of deceives us. And well, I won't give it away. Anyways, it's John. He points the gun at them, demanding to let them know that he's actually the one that it was he that shot the police officer, killed the African American convenience store clerk, and that he did this mainly because to demonstrate to his brother that he shared the same disdain against the police and his loyalty to the white supremacy, and the fact that the police had always fucked with his brother and whatnot. So he basically wanted to prove that he was just as much as an equal to him, pretty much. And as a result, Beck tries to create a diversion where he actually blames Kessler for murdering Burns, and they both go in the opposite directions, where Beck kind of like hurls insults about him and his brother and whatnot, and saying that he was a bit of a pussy, that he sucked every cock in the joint. And John recuperates whenever he continues to open fire and runs out of his bullets. Beck shoots him right in the neck, and then he falls down next to his brother's death. And then at a local press conference, before then, Kressler and Beck have a conversation where Kressler doesn't have anything much to say to him, and Beck says, "You gave up your gun. You did what no cop should ever do." And Kressler says he was going to kill me, and then Beck says he was going to kill us both anyway. And he's like, "Who are you to say?" Or Kressler says, "Who are you to say if you told me when I killed his brother? If it's up to you, I would be dead." And Beck responds with, "It was up to me." So basically, later at the press conference, eventually Kressler, while not speaking with Beck, he does give credit to all the local police officers and whoever were involved. They deserve every bit of thanks as they deserve, pretty much. And basically, when Beck walks out of that, I was seeing the press conference. Both him and Dixon have this conversation about him being shot. And earlier, when Beck said something about, was there anyone willing to go through a door with me? Dixon responds by eventually saying that he would be willing to go through a door with him any time of the week. And he also, says that that there's Reid also tells not Reid. Dixon tells Beck that basically there's definitely more to life than death in Texas. All you gotta do is just give it half the chance. So they kind of befriend each other and they basically go their separate ways, with Don Johnson kind of smiling at the end, regain whatever he has left, and that's how it ends. So anyways, like I said, I think Don Johnson really did an excellent job. He showed that he had the acting chops to kind of play a complex character who is kind of battling, his own demons, dealing with divorce, alcoholism, some of his unintentional, uncouth behavior, even though it's not necessarily bad. Like, he doesn't get along with Arthur Kressler, who's kind of uptight in his own way, and Forsythe actually did a good job. He's known for playing kind of badass roles, but he actually plays the uptight FBI agent really well. Like, they have this little moment where apparently Beck's not wearing a cold weather coat since he's in Oklahoma, and he's talking about how he believes that Gephardt were expecting Beck and Kressler. He's like, who the fuck do they think are? And Kressler's like, as a professional, I appreciate your minimizing your language and whatnot. And he's like, Beck's like, you're kidding me. He's like, no sir, I'm not kidding. He's like, hey, I'm telling you something big is happening here. I'm telling you something unbelievable is going to happen big, and all it grabs you is my language? The fuck's the matter with you? And then, of course, Kressler reveals he's a Christian and whatnot, but he finds his language personally offensive. And of course, despite all that, he reminds Beck to get a cold weather coat because you can freeze to death in this weather. And whenever Kressler walks away, Don Johnson's like, seriously? And there's also this moment where, like I said before, I like the scene between... Well, I'll get the cons and pros. I feel like I was kind of going off a bit. I guess the cons, unfortunately, as much as I like Penelope Ann Miller, because she's not in the film very much. After 32 and a half minutes, she's not in the film anymore. Same with kind of Bob Allen. They're in more of the beginning of the film in L.A., but apparently they're only in there for like maybe 4 or 5 minutes tops. And I felt like, while it was cool to see their characters, and I felt like they could have done better with those. I felt like they really didn't do much with them, especially with Penelope Ann Miller. But there was a rumor that apparently after the press conference was over, and I guess after he had his conversation with Dixon, apparently there was a deleted scene where he does interact with Penelope Ann Miller's character, and they kind of reconcile and whatnot. So they did shoot it, but apparently it was cut out. I would have liked to have seen that in the film. So I guess that's one of the cons to this film, is like they kind of show these characters and then they don't show them again. It's like they're just kind of like the lead up, and it's kind of disappointing. I wish I would have seen them done alone, see the characters grow and learn from it, because Elliot kind of reports on Beck kidnapping, because that's what I was going to get to. After Webley gives Beck all the information, he actually takes Webley to Burns' place, even though he supposedly was going to drop him off because Webley likes to jog and do something because he's like a health nut and wants to do something for the cardiovascular system. But he kidnaps him, takes him to Burns' place, and then, like I said, he ends up chasing that guy Ellis and throws up on him, like I said, which I thought was still hilarious because he vomits on him twice, and right when he's trying to interrogate him and when he's telling him he wants more information, he's like, Beck says, I have a splitting headache, I'm seeing double. He's like, shit, I might throw up again. And then Ellis is like, oh, please, I'll tell you anything. He basically tells him what he wants to hear, pretty much. And he says, like, don't puke. There's, like I said, there's like some great moments of levity in this film. Even though, like I said, it's an action thriller film, I think it used the bits of humor very well. There was moments of subtlety and humor, and the biggest one was when he gets examined by the psychiatrist played by Michael Jeter, where he basically gosh, I'm going off the top again. I guess overall, I wish they would have done something with the supporting characters, because, like I said, Penelope Ann Miller's like billed second, but she's only in the film for like 4 minutes, and Bob Allen's character is kind of in the same capacity, and maybe there is some little nitpicks, maybe a few pacing issues, but the pros, there's definitely good bits of action, like the shootout between Burns and Beck during the when they first encounter each other at Bakersfield, I believe, in Arizona, And then apparently the little scene where Burns tries to kill Beck in his own vehicle, pretty much. But Johnson, like I said, Johnson's character swerves into the police officer vehicle, and that eventually gets Bobby and everyone else out of there whenever Beck sets fire to a police car by using matches, and the fuel ignites and blows up. And then, of course, there is the shootout towards the very end between Beck and some of Dixon's men and Beck and Bobby, and then it's not like an action-packed type movie, but the action, when it's there, it's very effective. It does its job very well. And, of course, the acting by Don Johnson is definitely top-notch. Like I said, he really did a great job, and he committed himself to the role. And I think also William Forsythe did a really great job as the uptight Arthur Kressler, and Tim Reid, I believe. Tim Reid, the guy that played Chief Dixon, he did a solid job in his role as the guy that, ends up helping out Beck and actually shows some sympathy towards him at the very end. He understands Beck, and like you said, he's willing to go through a door with him any time if they were to work together again. And Frank Military, the guy that played Bobby Burns, he did a good job as playing kind of our main villain, even though it turns out he's not really the one that shot down the police officer and the convenience store clerk. But you see how dangerous and how dangerous of a villain he can be whenever he can go anywhere and have his presence known and have a group of people following him. How even though he's been in jail, he's a very smart and technical kind of villain, and he tries to get to know his enemy to some degree, and he doesn't bullshit, especially at the very end when you find out he's not the real killer of those two victims, even though it shows that he can be a very efficient killer. But anyway, and I'll get to the biggest thing I liked about this scene. The scene where the uptight shrink, played by Michael Jeter, is basically trying to get an idea of whether he can pass the evaluation. And then, like I said, whenever the psychiatrist asked about what was so funny, and Beck tries to drop it, and Krantz refuses to do that. Of course, Beck tells him that he really does look like Woody Allen, which he does, and apparently Krantz considers that as ridicule and gets butthurt about it and tries to, fail Beck on the examination, even though Beck is going to be honest. And he says this case didn't land in his lap. He just wanted to finish it. He was determined. And then, like I said, right after Krantz says their time is up and looks like he's going to try to fail him, Beck's like, He closes his door, and he basically tells Krantz, "We tried it your way, Doc. Now we're going to try it mine." And then Krantz tries to get him out, and he's like, "You're not a safe..." Krantz tries to say, "You're not a safe man to put in the streets, Beck." And then he tries to grab at Beck, and then Beck kind of twists his arm and grabs at his throat, and he says, "You're not a safe man to put in this office, Dr. Krantz, because you look like Woody Allen. Because if I get pulled off this case because you look like Woody Allen, I will not be responsible for what I will do to you. If you have some dues to pay, my God, then you pay him, because I will not. I will fixate on you as the instrument of my destruction, and you will never feel safe in your world again." Very great acting by Johnson in that scene. And kind of funny how he decides to get back at Krantz for trying to pull that shit onto him. He's like, "Yeah, buddy, fuck you. You're not going to try to fucking... I at least was honest, and you try to fuck me over. I'm going to make you fucking... You better pass your exam, and I'll fucking..." It's very effective. It's done very well by Don Johnson. And there's no downbeat ending. I mean, the hero, is alive, and I don't know, just... It's a very solid film. It's not, a film that I would watch every day, but it's a underrated little gem, and I think it does I think the plot and story and structure is executed very well to an extent. And plus, Don Johnson really commands this role very well, and it shows that he has a capability of being a leading man, but unfortunately, he never got that chance to have that breakout role, and it's too bad, because he is a very solid actor when he wants to be. I feel like there's something else. And also, the music was very effective. I can kind of tell where Michael Kamen's cues came in. Like it came in, like whenever the suspect, who turns out to be John Burns, arming up, and then apparently the scene between him and Krantz, like I said, Kamen was brought in the kind of low-key Die Hard score because of his work on Lethal Weapon and the first three Die Hard films. But he already had the first Die Hard movie. He had quite a busy year in '89. He had this film. He did Roadhouse, believe it or not. What was the other film? License to Kill, the James Bond film. So yeah, Kamen had a pretty interesting year in '89. So yeah. But you know what? I think I'm about to run out of time. But overall, this is a very solid film, and I think if you watch it, I think you might like it too. You know. I don't know what else to say about it, but it's just give it a watch and give it a chance, and you won't be disappointed. Okay, that's going to do it for me. I'm going to review I Love You Man next, and I will see you then, folks. See ya.